He made the whole world laugh at a junkyard. You know the song. The trumpet blares, the beat drops. It is the theme to Sanford and Son. Quincy Jones wrote that music just for him. He said it captured his loose, wild style. But listen closely. The silence behind the laughter is deafening. Before the fame, he was just a kid named John Elroy Sanford. He was born in Street Louis in 1922. He had red wavy hair and a light face. Kids teased him every single day. They called him names. So he fought back with jokes. He learned to make them laugh so they would not hit him. But here is the twist. His pain ran deep. His father left him when he was only 4 years old. Then, his mother left him too. She ran off to Chicago with a bodyguard for the gangster Al Capone. Picture that. Your mama chooses a mobster over you. She left him dirt poor with his grandmother. He resented her for it. The anger burned inside him like a fire. He got kicked out of school in the 5th grade for throwing a book at a teacher. He was 10 years old and already on the streets. How did this angry, abandoned boy become the king of comedy? Let's dig into the truth. The house in Street Louis was empty. There was no father to guide him. There was no mother to hold him. John Elroy Sanford stood in the quiet rooms of his grandmother's house. He was only 4 years old. The dust settled on the floorboards. The silence felt heavy. He felt the sting of abandonment on his skin. His father, Fred Glenn Sanford, walked out the door and never came back. Then his mother, Mary, made a choice that still cuts deep today. She looked at her 2 sons. Then she looked at the bright lights of Chicago. She chose a man over her boys. And not just any man. She chose a mobster. A bodyguard for the notorious Al Capone. Imagine that pain. She packed her bags. She smelled of perfume and promises. She left little John and his big brother with their grandmother. She got on a train and vanished into the city of gangsters. The boys were alone. But gravity pulls hardest when you have nothing to hold on to. John did have one person. He had his big brother. His name was Fred G. Sanford Jr. You know that name. You have heard it 1,000 times. Every time you watched Sanford and Son, you heard Red Foxx call out his own name. But on the show, he was the father. In real life, Fred was the brother he worshipped. Here is the deal. Fred was everything John wanted to be. He was tough. He was street smart. He walked with a swagger that said he owned the block. But Fred had demons too. He was always in trouble. He drifted in and out of jail cells like a ghost. The police knew his face. The neighbors whispered when he walked by. But to John, Fred was a king. They lived in poverty that hurts to think about. They were dirt poor. They did not have fancy clothes. They did not have enough food. The hunger gnawed at their bellies. The cold wind of Street Louis blew through the cracks in the walls. Their grandmother did her best. She had native blood in her veins. She was strong, but she was old. She could not tame 2 wild boys with broken hearts. John tried to go to school. He walked into the classroom with his head high, but the world was cruel. He looked different. His grandmother was a full-blooded Native American. John had her genes. He had red, wavy hair. His skin was very light. In an all-black school, he stuck out like a sore thumb. The other kids saw a target. They pointed fingers. They laughed. They called him names that stung worse than a slap. They mocked his red hair. They mocked his light face. He felt the heat rise in his cheeks. He wanted to fight. He wanted to scream. But wait, it gets deeper. He found a weapon sharper than any knife. He found comedy. When the bullies circled him, he did not throw a punch. He threw a joke. He snapped back. He made fun of their shoes. He made fun of their faces. He learned that if he could make the crowd laugh, the bullies lost their power. The laughter was a shield. It protected him from the pain. He became the class clown. He commanded the room, and guess who sat right there with him? Picture a little girl with a sharp tongue and a stern face. Her name was LaWanda Page. Decades later, the world would know her as Aunt Esther. She would stand toe-to-toe with him on national television. She would call him a heathen. She would swing her purse at him. But back then, in the dusty classrooms of Street Lewis, they were just two kids trying to survive. They go way back. Their bond was forged in the fire of childhood, but the classroom could not hold him. The anger inside John was too big for a desk. He was smart, but he was furious. He resented his mother for leaving. He missed his father. He watched his idol, his brother Fred, running the streets. He wanted to be out there too. The breaking point came fast. He was in the 5th grade. He was 10 years old. A teacher pushed him too far. The rage boiled over. John picked up a book. He felt the weight of it in his hand. He threw it. The book sailed through the air. It hit the teacher. The loud thud echoed in the room. That was it. The school doors slammed shut behind him. He was expelled. He was a dropout before he even hit puberty. Now, the streets were his school. He joined his brother Fred. Fred was 14 now. He was deep into life. The two Sanford boys roamed Street Lewis. They looked for trouble and they found it. They had no supervision. Their grandmother was too old to chase them down. She watched them slip away. Her heart broke a little more every day. She knew she could not save them. The streets of Street Lewis in the 1930s were hard. You had to be quick. You had to be tough. John learned to hustle. He watched the pimps and the players. He listened to the rhythm of the street corner. He soaked it all in. But the situation at home was crumbling. His grandmother looked at John. She saw a boy heading for a jail cell or an early grave. She saw the shadow of his brother falling over him. She made a desperate choice. She could not handle him anymore. She decided to send him away. She packed his things. She told him he was going to Chicago. He was going to live with the woman who abandoned him. He was going to live with his mother. Picture the train ride. The wheels clacked against the steel tracks. The smoke filled the air. He left the only home he knew. He left his brother, Fred, behind. He was heading north to a mother who chose a mobster over him. He was heading into the unknown. He thought the change of scenery would save him. He thought Chicago would be a fresh start. But here is the twist. The city of wind and gangsters was not a sanctuary. It was a jungle. And John Elroy Sanford was walking right into the belly of the beast. He had his jokes. He had his anger. But he had no idea that the hardest days were still ahead of him. The pain was just beginning to marinate. The boy on that train was about to see things that would make a grown man tremble. Picture the Mount Rushmore of comedy. You see the faces carved in stone. You see Richard Pryor. You see Eddie Murphy. You see Bill Cosby. They are giants. They filled stadiums and sold out theaters. But if you ask them who the real king is, they all point to one man. They point to the man with the raspy voice and the bow legs. They point to Red Fox. He was the blueprint. He was the original. Before the bright lights of Hollywood caught him, he was already a legend in the streets. Here is the deal. Success did not happen overnight. It was a slow burn. It started in the smoky clubs and the late night spots. He worked the Chitlin Circuit. He ground out jokes while the rest of the world was sleeping. He was building an empire one laugh at a time. Look at the numbers. They are staggering. Red Fox recorded over 55 albums. Let that sink in. 55. Most comedians today are lucky to film one special every few years. Red was a machine. He pumped out records like a factory line. And these were not just any records. They were dangerous. They were raw. He had an X-rated comedy style that made polite society blush. He said things you were not supposed to say. He talked about real life. He talked about the dirt and the grit. People loved it. He sold millions of copies, millions. In basements and barbershops across America, people were listening to Red Fox. They hid the album covers from their children. They played the vinyl until the grooves wore smooth. He was the voice of the underground. But wait, it gets bigger. He had a friend named Quincy Jones. You know the name, the musical genius. They went way back. They knew each other since the 1940s. They came up together during the glory days of the Apollo Theater. Quincy saw the hustle up close. He saw Red work the crowd. Quincy Jones said something profound. He said he never thought anyone would give Red Fox his own TV show. Why? Because Red was too real. He was too raw. His style was X-rated. The networks wanted clean. They wanted safe. Red Fox was a stick of dynamite. But gravity pulls hardest when you least expect it. The world changed. The networks needed something new. And suddenly, the underground king was on national television. Sanford and Son hit the airwaves. It was an explosion. It was historical. It was the first Black sitcom to hit national TV since Amos and Andy. That is a massive gap in time. The pressure was immense. The whole country was watching. Quincy Jones stepped up. He wrote the theme song. He said he wrote it specifically to fit Red's personality. Listen to that song again. It is loose. It is funky. It has a swagger that cannot be taught. That trumpet blares just like Red's laugh. It signals that the boss is in the building. The show became a phenomenon. Grandparents sat in front of the TV. Kids sat on the floor. Everybody knew that theme song. Soon as the first note hit, you ran to the living room. Red Fox was no longer just a comedian. He was a household name. He was the star. He took the pain of his childhood and turned it into gold. Remember his brother? The one he idolized? The one named Fred G. Sanford? Red made sure the whole world knew that name. On the show, his character was named Fred G. Sanford. He immortalized his big brother. Every time he said his name on screen, he was paying tribute to the boy who raised him in the streets of Street Louis. He turned his brother's name into a legend. The rewards came pouring in. He reached the mountaintop. He won a Golden Globe Award. Picture him standing on that stage. The lights glared off the gold trophy. The applause washed over him. He was a long way from the dirt poor days in Street Louis. He was a long way from the boy who got kicked out of school in the 5th grade. He was a winner. He had the fame. He had the money. He had the respect of the kings. Richard Pryor looked up to him. Eddie Murphy studied him. He was the master teacher. He lived the high life. He had the cars. He had the suits. He walked with the confidence of a man who had conquered the world. He proved his mother wrong. He proved the teachers wrong. He proved the bullies wrong. He was the king of comedy. But here is the twist. When you climb that high, the air gets thin, The lights get hot. Everyone wants a piece of you. The pressure to stay on top is heavier than the struggle to get there. While the world saw us smile, the shadows were growing. The laughter on the screen was hiding a new kind of pain. The money was flowing in, but it was flowing out just as fast. The higher he flew, the harder the fall would be, and the silence was about to become louder than the applause. Success is a dangerous drug. It lifts you up to the clouds, but it does not tell you how far the drop is. Red Fox stood on top of the world. He was the king of comedy. He had the #1 show in America. He had the love of the people, but beneath the laughter, the foundation was cracking. Here is the deal. Being the boss costs money. Red lived large. He was a boy from the poverty of Street Louis. He never had anything. So when the money came, he spent it. He bought a fleet of cars. He bought a massive home in Las Vegas. He draped himself in gold jewelry. He wanted the world to see his shine, but he was also generous to a fault. He remembered the hard days. He remembered the empty belly, so he gave money away. If a friend was in trouble, Red opened his wallet. If a stranger had a sad story, Red handed them cash. He supported an entourage of people. He kept them on the payroll. He was loyal, but loyalty does not pay the taxes. While Red was spending, the government was counting. The Internal Revenue Service watched every move he made. They saw the cars, they saw the houses, they saw the millions of dollars flowing through his hands, and they noticed something else. He was not paying his share. The trouble started slowly. It began with letters, then it turned into warnings. Red ignored them. He thought he was untouchable. He was Fred G. Sanford. He was a legend. Who would dare touch the king? But gravity pulls hardest when you look away. It was 1989. The hammer finally fell. The IRS did not care about his jokes. They did not care about his Golden Globe Award. They claimed he owed nearly $3 million in back taxes. Picture the scene. It was a sunny day in Las Vegas. The palm trees swayed in the wind, but inside Red's mansion, a storm broke loose. Federal agents swarmed the property. They did not knock politely. They came to seize everything. Red stood there in his robe. He watched strangers touch his things. They took his furniture. They took his electronics. They walked out the door with his jewelry. They even took the cars from the driveway. But wait, it gets worse. They stripped him of his dignity. They took the bed his dog slept in. They left him in an empty house. The rooms echoed with silence. The man who made millions laugh was left with nothing but the clothes on his back. The shame burned him. The news cameras were there. They filmed the trucks driving away with his life. The whole world saw the king fall. The tabloids ran the pictures. People whispered. They called him a fool. They said he blew it all. The phone stopped ringing. The fair weather friends vanished. The entourage disappeared. When the money dried up, the loyalty evaporated. Red was alone. He was 68 years old. He was tired. His body was breaking down. He walked with a limp. His back ached. He should have been resting. He should have been enjoying his golden years. But the debt hung over him like a dark cloud. He had to go back to work. He had no choice. He needed a paycheck. He signed a deal for a new show. It was called The Royal Family. He teamed up with his old friend, Della Reese. He tried to put on a brave face. He told jokes to the press. He smiled for the cameras. But his eyes told a different story. He was stressed. He was worried. The pressure was eating him alive from the inside out. Then came October 11th, 1991. The air on the set was cool. The lights were bright. Red was joking with the cast. He seemed fine. He was doing what he did best. He was making people smile. But then the shadow moved in. Red was standing near a chair. Suddenly, he stopped talking. His face went blank. He grabbed his chest. He stumbled. His knees gave out. He crashed to the floor. Now, listen closely. This is the tragedy. The cast and crew stood there. They watched him lie on the ground. Some of them even chuckled. They did not call for help. They did not run to him. Why? Because of Sanford and Son. For years, Red made a career out of faking a heart attack. Every week, he clutched his chest. He looked up to heaven. He shouted, "Elizabeth, I am coming to join you, honey." It was his signature move. It was the funniest bit in television history. So when he fell on that stage in 1991, everyone thought it was a joke. They waited for the punchline. They waited for him to open his eyes and wink. They waited for the laughter. But the silence stretched on. The seconds ticked by. The laughter never came. Delarice looked at him closely. She saw the fear in his eyes. She realized this was not a scene. This was real. The royal family set turned into a scene of panic. They called the paramedics. They rushed him to the hospital, but it was too late. The heart that gave so much love finally stopped beating. The stress of the debt, the pain of the betrayal, and the weight of the crown were too much. Red Foxx died that evening. He was 68 years old. The irony is sharp enough to cut you. The very joke that made him a legend was the reason nobody saved him. He died in the shadow of his own success. He left. This world broke. The IRS was still chasing him even in death. They wanted to auction off his remaining items. They wanted to take the last scraps of his legacy. But his friend Eddie Murphy stepped in. He paid for the funeral. He made sure the king was buried with respect. Red Foxx started with nothing in the slums of Street Louis. He conquered the world. He changed the face of comedy forever. But in the end, he learned the hardest lesson of all. Fame borrows, but it does not give. And when the bill comes due, it takes everything. The news hit the streets like a cold wind. It was October 1991. The headlines screamed in bold black ink. The television screens flashed the face we all knew. Red Foxx was dead. People froze in their living rooms. They stopped on the sidewalks. It felt impossible. He was the man in the junkyard. He was the man who always bounced back. He was the man who laughed at death every single week. But this time, he did not get up. The media jumped on the story fast. They loved the irony. The newspapers printed the details with a twist of dark humor. They said he died doing his famous routine. They said he clutched his heart just like Fred Sanford. They called it a poetic end. But here is the twist. There was no poetry on that floor. The public saw a tragedy wrapped in a joke, but the truth was far uglier. Red Foxx died in fear. He died surrounded by people who thought his pain was an act. The laughter of the crew was the last thing he heard. That is not funny. That is heartbreaking. Then came the hypocrisy. Hollywood loves a fallen star. Suddenly, everyone was his best friend. Celebrities gave interviews. They called him a genius. They wiped tears for the cameras. They praised the path he blazed for Black comedians. But wait, look closer. Where were these friends a year before? When the IRS agents kicked down his door, the phone did not ring. When they stripped the jewelry off his neck, the Hollywood mansion stayed closed. When he stood in his empty house in Las Vegas, stripped of his dignity, he stood alone. The industry that made millions off his back watched him drown in debt. They let him work himself to death at 68 years old just to pay the tax man. The tragedy did not end with his last breath. Here is the sad part. The king of comedy was broke. The government had picked his bones clean. There was no money left in the bank. His widow could not afford to bury him. Think about that. The man who recorded 55 albums, the man who had the #1 show in America, the man who made the world smile. He did not have a dime to put a stone over his head. The tabloids were ready to feast on this shame. They prepared the headlines about the pauper's funeral. They wanted to show the world how far he had fallen. But gravity pushes, and brotherhood pushes back. One man stepped out of the shadows. He was a young superstar. He was the new king of comedy. His name was Eddie Murphy. Eddie knew the truth. He knew there is no Eddie Murphy without Red Foxx. He knew that Red took the hits so the next generation could shine. Eddie did not give an interview. He opened his checkbook. He paid for the funeral. He paid for the burial. He made sure the legend went out like royalty. He saved Red from the final insult of a poor man's grave. The funeral was a moment of truth. Friends and family gathered. They told stories. They laughed through the tears. They remembered the boy from Street Lewis with the red hair. They remembered the hustle. But the world outside kept turning. Today, you can flip on the TV and catch a rerun of Sanford and Son. The trumpet blares. The old red truck rolls in. Red looks at the camera and smiles. We still laugh. The jokes still land. He is still the funniest man in the room. But now we watch with different eyes. We see the pain behind the eyes. We see the pressure in the shoulders. We know the cost of that laughter. Red Foxx gave us everything he had. He gave us his joy. He gave us his talent. He gave us his life. The world took it all. He taught us that fame is a heavy coat to wear. He showed us that money can vanish in a blink. But most of all, he taught us that even when the heart stops, the legacy never dies. He was the underdog who became a king. And even though he left with empty pockets, he left us with a treasure that no tax man can ever take away. He left us the laughter, and that is the only gold that matters. Look at the comedy stage today. You see giants like Dave Chappelle. You see Kevin Hart selling out football stadiums. You see the glitz and the glamour, but if you strip away the bright lights, you find the foundation. It is built on the back of John Elroy Sanford. Here is the deal. Red Foxx was not just a comedian. He was a battering ram. He took the raw, gritty truth of Black life and forced it into American living rooms. He did not change his voice to please the networks. He did not hide his culture. He forced the world to look at a junkyard owner and see a man with dignity. He opened the door. Richard Pryor walked through it. Eddie Murphy ran through it. Every Black comedian who holds a microphone today stands on the ground. Red Foxx cleared with his bare hands. He took the hits so they could take the bows. Picture the legacy. 55 albums. A show that defined a generation. A style that broke every rule. The IRS took his cars. They took his house. They took his jewelry. But they failed to take the one thing that really mattered. They could not repo his influence. Gravity pulls us all down eventually, but some stars burn too bright to fade. Even today, 30 years later, you can hear his raspy voice cutting through the noise. You can see that distinctive walk. You can feel the timing that no school can teach. When you hear that trumpet blare on the TV screen, do not feel sad for the man who died broke. Feel proud of the man who lived rich in spirit. He played the game by his own rules. He laughed in the face of hardship, and he made sure we were laughing right there with him. He was the original. He was the king. And kings do not die, they just move to a higher throne. Some stories end without closure, but dignity doesn't need applause. What is your favorite line from Sanford and Son? Do you think Hollywood treated Red fairly in the end? Share your memories in the comments below. We want to hear your voice.